I just like to welcome everyone who's joined this this session. My name's Andrew Hyde. I work as a commissioning editor at Cambridge University Press, and we're really pleased to be here and pleased that people have attended this event.
Right, so thanks very much everybody for being here today, and we're going to spend about maybe 35-40 minutes together talking about an interesting topic, which is the challenges and opportunities for data science in chemical engineering. And we're joined by a panel of experts who are with us here today, and we're going to try and answer some questions which we think are at the heart of what are the challenges and opportunities in that area. So the panelists are Ruth Meisner, who is from Imperial College. She's in the Department of Computing at Imperial. She got her first degree from MIT, got a PhD from Princeton University. She won the 2017 Macfarlane Award from the Royal Academy of Engineering. She was also a fellow of the Royal Academy, of the Royal Academy, in 2020 Outstanding Young Research Award from the AIChE Computing and Systems Technology Division, and we're delighted that she's here with us today. She's also Associate Editor of Computers and Chemical Engineering. We've also got Oscar Mendez Lucio, who is a research scientist and at Janssen Pharmaceuticals and AI intelligence for drug design. And Oscar got his PhD in chemistry, in chemoinformatics, in fact, from the University of Cambridge back in 2016. And in 2017, he joined Bayer to apply deep learning to their research pipeline. And he's currently working at Janssen. Is that how you pronounce it? Janssen?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, terrific. And of course, yeah, Janssen are in the news because of all the stuff that's going on in terms of the vaccine. So really exciting stuff. Then we've got Francisco Navarro-Brull, who is an industrial data scientist at Solvay. And for those of you who don't know Solvay is a Belgian company providing advanced materials and specialty chemicals worldwide. And during his PhD, he did modeling and simulation, and he worked with Klaus Janssen at MIT. And now he helps solve challenging optimization and process engineering problems for a wide range of chemical industries around the globe. And so we're interested in his insights on data science, chem-eng, data-centric engineering. We've also got Maria Jose Nieves. I'm hoping I've got your name right. And she's a senior research scientist at Eli Lilly. She got a PhD back in 2014 from MIT and first degree from Madrid. And so she's also worked with Klaus Janssen at MIT on scale-up of multi-phase flow chemistries, doing both experiments and CFD. She's worked for Dow Chemicals, and now she's working for Eli Lilly. And welcome to you, Maria. And then we have Costas Pantelides, who's at Imperial College, has been for some time. He is a professor of chemical engineering, and he was co-founder of Process Systems Enterprise, and I think current CEO of Process Systems Enterprise, and they've been acquired recently by Siemens, and he's going to give us his insights on data science, engineering, chemical engineering, data-centric engineering, etc. Okay, so welcome to you all, and we also have a number of people who've turned up to listen to the discussion, and so I think if we could just maybe have people on mute, unless you want to say something, in which case please raise your hand. If you've got any questions, pop them in the chat and we'll deal with them as soon as possible. But I'd very much like to get going with an opening question, which I'd like to put to each member of the panel, if that's okay. So the first question is, what do you see as the biggest challenge or misconception of data science applied to engineering? And where does the biggest opportunity lie? And I'm going to start by asking that question to Maria.
Yeah, so regarding the big challenges of applying data science in engineering, or in general, I believe it's perhaps data integration on one side, because, for example, in the drug discovery process, which is where I'm working right now, there is a lot of data that is collected across the entire discovery and development process. Every data has a different format, or there is a lot of old data that perhaps hasn't been stored electronically. So we need data that has high quality, that you can find, that is accessible, that is organized, so that you can process that data and extract conclusions from the data. Also, regarding the data, another challenge is that perhaps in drug discovery, we only know a very small portion of the data, and the chemical space is so broad that you can extract information from that portion, but you still don't know what is happening in the rest of the chemical space. So it's very hard to access that data. And that is, I would say, that is one of the main challenges as well. We only have pharmacology data for about 10 to the 7th molecules, or safety data that it's on the order of 10 to the 4th molecules. And the chemical space is much larger than that. Another thing that I believe is a challenge is that many of the models are like a black box. So sometimes you don't know exactly what is happening inside. It's good when you don't have first principle models in order to have a better understanding. But I think we have to be careful of first what type of data we're using, the quality of the data, and what are the results that we obtain from that. And perhaps I would like to mention perhaps one of the main opportunities regarding data science in the case of drug discovery is the novel molecular design, which can also be applied to new materials design. Is I think one of the main opportunities to apply data science. And in a broader term, what is called closed loop drug design or molecule design is to go not just from the design space of the molecule, but going further and using data science in all the intermediate steps. For example, use data science to recommend reaction conditions for a specific pathway, or to find different retrosynthetic steps or retrosynthetic tools to find the different synthetic steps that you could use to synthesize a molecule. And then if you combine everything with automation in the lab, you could go from designing the drug to synthesize the molecule and then test it also in the lab. So closing that loop, I think, is one of the main opportunities, a big opportunity, but also a big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I neglected to mention that that's the kind of thing that you're doing on a daily basis, presumably, which is trying to close that loop, trying to think of smart strategies for experimentation, use of AI, etc., for molecular design at Lilly. So, okay, great. Thank you very much. Let me go to Costas to ask him for his insights into all this, because Costas also had and still has a lot of experience in terms of molecular design and applications of modeling in this space. So Costas, any comments?
Yes, I mean, thanks, Omar. Obviously, I come from a process systems engineering viewpoint. Most of the things we do are model-based. So when I ask what data science can do for us, really I'm asking for two questions or two possible contributions. One is, how can we increase the predictive accuracy of the models we have now? And the second one is, if we have a model, how can we do what we want to do with that model in terms of analyzing the process and optimizing the process? If we take the first area of improving the models, then really it is, and our experience has been quite significant in this, it is very difficult to envisage a purely data-driven model producing producing the accuracy we require nowadays. Obviously, we're in a different boat than other areas where there is not so much first principles background. We start with a very strong first principles background. So what they're looking for is to improve on that. And there are various reasons which I can go into, but I won't, as to why a purely data-driven model doesn't really stand much of a chance to deliver what we want. So the key challenge for us, the key priority is hybrid physics-based data-driven models. And the approach we've been following is essentially do the best you can with physics-based models, and then identify the specific gaps that cannot be described very well from first principles, and then apply data-driven elements to those gaps. Things like the activation mechanisms in catalysts, fouling in heat exchangers, and so on. There, it is very difficult to actually have a computationally tractable, to say the least, first principles model, and you may be doing better using a data-driven element for those. And once you combine these, you can actually get very predictive models, like combined physics and data-driven elements. The second aspect where there is a potential contribution, a big contribution, is once you have the model, how can you solve reliably and efficiently the underlying simulation optimization problems you have? Because you may have a model which is very accurate, very predictive, possibly all physics or physics and data-driven hybrid, but it may be not possible to solve that model realistically, for example, in real time, as we move to real-time applications. And there's a big role to play by surrogate modeling. Okay, so surrogate modeling, which perhaps produces a compact, explicit representation of a much bigger model. That's one kind of contribution of data science. The other contribution is in areas like reinforcement learning, where we can begin to get explicit expressions for optimal solutions, which again can be implemented in real time. So there is a big role to play for data-driven modeling. It is not a comprehensive, all-encompassing answer. It needs to be combined with the techniques and the frameworks that we have already for doing this kind of thing.
Okay, thanks very much, Costas. Let me bring in Ruth Meisner to get her take on this.
Yeah, so thanks to Maria and Costas already for their really nice answers. I'll try to add to it, but not repeat what they've said, because of course that was really nice. My own perspective is that I'm in the area of computational optimization. And so I'm interested in solving big optimization problems, and we're interested in developing algorithms. We develop software. Where data enters our research is actually in incorporating uncertainty. You can think of this as sort of some of these gaps that Costas is mentioning, where maybe you can't have sort of a physics-based model or something like this. So over and over again, I think what we see as a big challenge is that you're taking a paucity of data, that you don't have enough, and that you're trying to find ways to maybe enrich this data, make it information rich in some way, and making it useful. So this really contrasts the work that maybe I would do, and I think maybe that Costas is mentioning as well, with my colleagues in the computer science department, because of course I sit in a computer science department. Most of my colleagues in the computer science department, they're dealing with very, very high volume data and very, very high variance data, which is not really the kind of data that I see with chemical engineering applications. So I think the contribution or the creativity that comes with chemical engineering is kind of figuring out what we can do with the data that we do have and getting what we need.
Great. Thanks very much, Ruth. Francisco, over to you. Let's hear your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, excellent contributions from the rest of the panelists. I'm going to be quite challenging myself because I will start with a challenge. The biggest challenge I face, and I work in a chemical company in the production side, so it's not research, is that it's often believed that machine learning and AI is something new. So it's something that is completely game-changing, okay, new. And this is a misconception from my point of view, because what we were hearing before is that we're using, hybrid models where we combine physics and data. But we have been doing that already. So for example, if I talk about pseudo-empirical correlations that have been there to estimate heat transfer coefficients and things like that, we were using their Reynolds number and not a non-dimensional number that today we can call them as a feature engineering or dimensionality reduction. And we're putting those on top of a nonlinear regression. So it's literally a supervised learning problem. But if a data scientist comes into a company trying to solve a chemical engineering problem, he will be finding these kind of relationships without the background. So it's not something new, and this is the part of the hybrid model that it was mentioned before. But this is the biggest misconception, I think, today, even at the level of STIRCO. And well, one of my jobs in Solvay is try to, show that kind of reasoning to chemical engineers, because the challenge now when this kind of, background information is that these are not necessarily black box models, and they cannot be, because we have to provide solutions that are safe to use. And there is not going to be a process engineer or even an operator that it will follow something that is presented as a black box. And there is a good reason for that, obviously, because not like other companies, that they don't have a physics or they don't have a process in the back, they just only have data, they have zero understanding. There is always physics, there's always a process behind. And not only that, but today we can open those black boxes, and this is the explainability, and this is a hot topic in research, and show why the black box is saying this. And what is happening today is that when we do that, we explain what the model found and we solve the issue, because we are in a chemical company and there is a process control, there is a sensor and actuator, there is a system behind, and of course there is process engineering behind. So when we open these black boxes, now they were told us it's something new. It turns out it's telling us a sensor was failing or this pipe is clogged. So no need to do this black box online because we just understood the problem. So the safety is not only to understand this, but also the extrapolation, which is a big risk of using these models. That's where you want to put physics as well, because they extrapolate better. But the other challenge is not reinventing the wheel, because this is coming from a big place that is something new. Very smart people are using this. We forget that there is a lot of good process control behind that we can use. We forget that there is the concept of process dynamics. Most of the models are not ready to capture the dynamics of the process. That to apply them, you need to. And things like that, for example, model predictive control is something very close related to what we are trying to do in data science. So overall, these are the biggest challenges to explain. This is not something new. And the challenges are on safety, which touches extrapolation and explainability, and especially not reinventing the wheel, because it's very easy when you don't know where you're going to just find something that it wasn't needed. That's for me the summary.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring in Oscar, if possible. Oscar?
Yeah, of course. I completely agree with the other answers. I think they are already covered most of them, most of the questions. So I will just kind of summarize everything. So the biggest challenges for me of data science applied to engineering in general, I see like mainly two of them. So one is data, as it was said before. We need enough data, but especially high quality and consistent data, so we can have be sure of our results. The second challenge that I would like to highlight is mindset of the people that you are working with. So if you are working in a very multidisciplinary environment, it's always difficult, first of all, to communicate the findings to other people that doesn't have the same background. The other thing that is difficult is also convince people that data science is actually working, but most importantly, convince people that data science won't solve all the problems. So getting there a little bit of expectation management. And probably finally, the opportunities where I see data science applied to engineering, it's any process or setting where you can get a lot of data, high quality data in a very fast pace. But also a setting where you need a problem. I mean, you need a problem. And if you have a problem or something that you want to optimize, then you can apply data science.
Okay. Great, thanks very much, Oscar. So we had effectively a warning from Costas, which is, over reliance on data is an issue, and I guess his background, his training, etc., kind of make him think about writing down a model first, and then maybe using data to either maybe try to accelerate the solution or, I don't know, do something else with it. But he is effectively saying that a data-driven solution on its own may be insufficient and maybe even dangerous. So that might be a good segue to talking about data-centric engineering. And maybe I'll come to Antonio to ask him about how he might define DCE. You're an editor of the DCE journal, and so you probably have your views as well about what DCE actually corresponds to. So over to you, Antonio.
Thanks, Omar. Yeah, so I would think that I'm just summarizing what everyone said, but it's not only using data science. I think like people have said, Francisco, Costas, and practically all these speakers, it's not about just smashing a neural network into an engineering application. It's more about to see how actually we can utilize lots of algorithms and methods that have lately been developed, but how we can tweak them and change them to actually be applicable to engineering systems, right? So just to give a very brief example that I many times give is reinforcement learning is a very nice algorithm. And like Costa says, I think it has lots of promise. But the main fact about reinforcement learning is that it doesn't take into account constraints. And that works very well if you're playing chess, or if you're playing Go, or if you're even playing video games. But if you want to apply to any engineering system, practically any engineering system has to have constraints. And some talks that I've been having with other people is that actually in engineering, most of the time, our solutions are also at the constraints, which makes it even more challenging and more important to have constraints in them. But yeah, I would say that that's data-centric engineering. So it's how to actually use data and utilize all the power that, because we do have lots of data now, but how to better use it in a way that it can add up to what we already have in our engineering applications.
You think you can give us an example from your work of the kind of data-centric engineering approaches that you've deployed?
I think so. Apart from, for example, from reinforcement learning, I think building, and I'm going to go back a bit to what Costas said. For example, building a model just data-driven, I don't think that's ideal for most engineering purposes. Most of the time, what we want to do is have some data-driven component, but also a knowledge-based component. So yeah, something that probably it's a lot in your alleyway, Omar, is, for example, when you're simulating fluid dynamics, right? You can try to, because it's super difficult to actually optimize systems which, simulating fluid dynamics is already difficult. Trying to optimize the systems which involves all the dynamics is even harder. So then sometimes what you can actually do is be able to have some data-driven component that can give you, that you don't have to solve all the Navier-Stokes equations, but that you can actually use a surrogate of it and then embed it into some system that later you can optimize. That would be, I think, more of the examples, and obviously reinforcement learning for control as well.
Okay, terrific. Would anybody like to comment on Antonio's take on data-centric engineering, the example that he's given us from the panelists?
Hi, yeah, I think the example that Antonio gave is an excellent example where the CFD calculation is extremely computation intensive. And indeed, by using techniques that we have now for surrogate modeling, we can get a model which is much more compact and reasonably accurate over a restricted domain by training it on data from the three-dimensional CFD calculation. So that is exactly the kind of thing I had in mind for when I say it allows us to do some of the techniques we have now, allow us to do the kind of computations we've always wanted to do, but realistically, in realistic time and reliably. There are no failures there because they're explicit expressions. I think the other thing is that in process systems engineering, we've been accumulating lots of techniques for dealing with optimization under uncertainty, analyzing flexibility of systems, and so on, all of which have, or most of which have seen very little application today because of computational complexity. If we can now apply them to surrogate models, we get a chance of actually making use of all these things that were being developed in the 80s and the 90s. And so far I've seen, as I said, have made very little impact because of computation.
Thank you, Costas. Let me bring in Ruth. I mean, you mentioned uncertainty, and so maybe I'll bring you in, Ruth, to make some comments at this stage.
So I definitely like the points that Antonio and Costas were just making, and indeed, what we are using is we are using surrogate modeling techniques to represent uncertainty. This is something where we're able to, say, extend robust optimization techniques. And what I mean by robust optimization is sort of optimization that sort of considers the worst case. So instead of optimizing with respect to what I hope the world will look like, I optimize with respect to what I am afraid might happen. And so in robust optimization, what we do is we sort of take into account the fact that as Antonio was mentioning, you might end up on the constraints themselves when you're making some sort of decision that you might want to, sort of push the real world as much as possible. And so with robust optimization, we try to make sure that we aren't being overly aggressive with our view of the world. And this is for us a place that we do indeed incorporate the data that we get from our collaborators. So for instance, our Schlumberger collaborators have really nice problems where, of course, they don't quite know what is happening as they're drilling down into their oil wells, and they have to make decisions that are based on sort of a number of the scheduling of the drill bit that they're doing. And what we're doing is that we are using surrogate models to represent their data, and then developing sort of approximations to a chance constraint, which is to say we are developing good mathematics to be able to represent the uncertainty in their problem, and then sort of revealing what's going on with this problem mathematically, and making it easy to solve. And as Costas says, basically what we are relying on is that we are relying on surrogate models and our ability to work in a nice computational way with surrogate models to be able to solve these optimization problems under uncertainty. So we're basically representing the data using a surrogate model and then working with a surrogate model mathematically.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Maria, Oscar, and Francisco, do you have any comments to make on this before we move on?
Probably yes. So going back where Costas was saying that it shouldn't be only data-driven models, I completely agree. For example, in my experience, models by themselves are not always giving you the right answer, but in the R&D setting of drug discovery, when you combine models with expertise from people, then it's really improving the output. So an example is we generate molecules using artificial intelligence generative models. And many times these generative molecules can give you some idea of what you're looking for, but almost never will give you the premium drug or the molecule that you're looking for. But at least this can give you a kind of, let's say, inspiration for the chemists of how to modify or how to improve these molecules. So I agree, only models or only data won't solve a problem, but always need to be combined with other kind of knowledge.
Brilliant. I was going to ask you a bit about your work in Janssen, maybe to do with vaccines, etc., and how data could be used there. We'll come back to that in a minute. Quite exciting stuff going on. Maria and Francisco, and anything else you'd like to add to this conversation? Maria?
Yeah, perhaps I can follow up what Oscar said, because I also worked on that, on using deep learning models, generative models for de novo drug design. And we have seen actually that in some internal experiments that we have run, that when we propose this kind of molecules to the chemists to select which ones they would choose for a specific projects, the results that the deep learning algorithms are giving us are promising. And we are using right now models that are based on very simple molecular representations. But looking into the future, we see that it's very promising to incorporate 3D representations of the molecules, which will more precisely represent how the molecules will behave from the point of view of the pharmacology. So we expect to have good results with that. And I think that data science is helping us to have perhaps propose molecules that perhaps it's difficult for a human to come up with a certain molecule. It's just for giving new ideas. So I think for that is helping us. And yeah, we're really excited to see future results in this aspect.
Thank you. Terrific. Francisco, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, something, because the panel and the people here are, I think, most of our chemical engineers or with that kind of background. So I don't know if we will have time to challenge ourselves, because everyone agrees here that we're going to need our, first principle model-based. Otherwise, this is not going to work. But although I have seen catastrophic failures of not using all of these basics, I also have seen huge success going to pure data-driven. So maybe if we have time, we can talk about when a more simple approach, purely data-driven, can be even a good idea. Because I don't want either to share the thinking that you're going to need to be an expert in optimization, in process engineering, in process simulation, in process control, and in data science to bring value, which is not true. Okay, so maybe for later we can talk about that.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have some time to do that, Francisco. I think there's a lot of value in that, in what sort of message we give to folks that want to get into data science, engineering, and data-centric engineering. Absolutely. In fact, we've sort of very smoothly segued into and have started to answer the next question, which was, in your life, in your line of work and research, what is the role of data, and what sort of role do data have in solving your problems? And I think we've already touched on that with Oscar and with Maria. So maybe what I'll do now is I might need to go back to Oscar. I'd like to talk a bit about the work that's been done there, maybe within the context of vaccines. But let me bring in Ruth, because Francisco is saying we're all chemical engineers, etc. I think you're a chemical engineer, but you're working in the computing department, and that must be very interesting, cross-fertilization of ideas. So, what happens on a daily basis there in terms of data, etc., etc.?
Well, I mean, it's great fun. So basically, I am trained as a chemical engineer, but then I would, all through undergraduate and PhD, I was taking mathematics and computer science classes. So basically, if anybody wants to do that, it's basically, you just have to work 1.2 times as hard, maybe 1.3, and you just make sure that you know the basics. Francisco is saying that we certainly can't all be experts in everything, but I guess what I like to do is, of the things that I want to master, I want to know the fundamentals and the basics, because of course fads come and go, and everybody's favorite black box utility comes and goes. Basically, what I do find in a computer science department is, in all honesty, they laugh at me a lot because I say things badly a lot of times. My PhD students in particular, what they will do is they will say, "This is how we say it, and now Ruth, this is how you would say it," and so they do the translation for me, which I do find very, very useful. I don't think I'm answering the entirety of your question. I've sort of veered. Will you direct me?
I was very interested to know what how you felt the transition was like, when you moved over to computing.
Oh, I did very, very badly. I got slammed on my first year of teaching reviews. They hated me. I did everything wrong, basically I had to learn what an undergraduate computer scientist did and didn't know, and it was just that I had assumed that I just didn't have it in my head, and now I can kind of switch between what different people know. It took me a lot of effort, and maybe there's a graceful way of doing it, but I didn't do it gracefully.
Okay. Well, I think you've not done very badly. I think you've done okay.
Once you understand it, you can do it. It's just we really do speak different languages.
I'll tell you what, why don't we pick up a couple of questions in the chat, and then maybe we can come back to the final question that we can wrap up. There is a question that I can see here in the chat that says, what sort of papers would you like to see submitted to Data-Centric Engineering? Now that we have some idea about what DCE is, we've got definition, etc. What sort of papers? So maybe that's a question. Let me go to Antonio. He's one of the associate editors now of DCE. So what do you think, Antonio?
So, I mean, again, I think it's a lot about what we've been talking, but I think anytime where you're using techniques from data science, from machine learning, from AI, but using them together with the engineering knowledge that we have and to solve problems that happen in engineering, right? So again, it's very different to be solving video games, but it's very different to when actually you have to solve problems in many other domains. I mean, chemical engineering is of course one of them, but I would say more when you combine the application of like traditional engineering with machine learning, data science, AI. That would be what I would think.
Thank you. Next question. Can you comment on what role the journal can play in the dissemination of the data we're accumulating about COVID? Very topical question. So it's dissemination of data, but presumably also some of the work that's being done with the data. So let's imagine that we're all, I don't know, editors of the DCE. Now we've defined DCE, and we have the pandemic. We've collected quite a lot of data on the pandemic for the past year. What would be the best way of organizing those data and organizing the work that's been done using those data, would you say? And maybe I'll go to Oscar, actually, because you're working as part of Janssen's effort, I guess. Are you connected to the vaccine, etc., etc.? Do you?
Unfortunately, not directly with the vaccine. This research is done in a completely different site. But what I can tell you is that I'm almost sure that every project done in Janssen right now has at least a little bit of data science in it. It can be from R&D, where you can use data science to come with new candidates, either vaccine or molecules. It can be in process where you try to optimize a process where you produce the molecules or the biologics, the vaccine. It can be when you do clinical trials, the way you choose the patients in order to have the best result and the most consistent result at the end. It can be something that we will need probably next year. We will need to optimize at some point the routes to disseminate or to ship to all these shipment of vaccines to reach most of the world as fast as possible. I'm sure data science will be there as well.
Yeah. So not just manufacturing, but also scale up, roll out, logistics.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've got to vaccinate the planet. So how do you do it? I agree. Maria, what are your thoughts on this as well?
Sorry. Well, I agree also with what Oscar mentioned. I think data science is in every step through all the discovery process for a drug. So it goes from research at any step to manufacturing or even the logistics part. So it can contribute at any point during the entire process.
Probably something that I would like to say as well is data science has helped us to reduce costs across all these different steps in the drug design. And that's helpful not only for the company, but also for the patient at the end, because hopefully this will be reflected in a lower price for the patient. So,
thank you. I think I'd like to go to Francisco because he was advocating the use of purely data-driven solutions for certain challenges. This might be an opportunity to hear his thoughts. And then I'd like to maybe segue towards what sort of message do we need to give to younger members of the community starting out their careers and wanting to get into DCE. So let's hear from Francisco about data-driven solutions first. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so also answering your question of the role of data. So in manufacturing or chemical plants, the data is something we accumulate. All of the sensor data, we historize this in our manufacturing systems, and we provide this information to the process engineers. So the role is critical because otherwise process engineers will be trying to do the best based on the knowledge of the plant and basically going trial and error. And this data from process is kind of experimental data. So it's very different from research, where it's very difficult to get, data that you can use. Here we have every day the plant running. So we accumulate this data and it can be used as experimental data. So it's crucial that we use that data. And in that regard, our process as well is under control. So the purely data-driven, it's never pure data-driven. It's always based on the knowledge from the process engineer, what he's doing. But there are techniques that are today available to process engineers that they don't require a high level of training on data science. And data science has two words, data and science. So the science part should come from the scientific method or engineering method from the process engineer. But this is an important point, and advice for the process engineers listening this is that don't feel intimidated, because what is happening is what happened to CFD, for example. If you go back in time, CFD was a matter of top universities where there was CFD code that only few people can run and give the results. Today we have CFD software, which allows us to use CFD without knowing all the details of how to do the discretization and the simulation and all of that. And we are going in the same direction with data science. Before, recently, there was these tools were only available for computer scientists that can understand, how to compile software. But today, there is very good software, and that with your basics that you have developed during your training programs, you can utilize to really find solutions quickly. So that will be my points on the pure data-driven, which is never pure data-driven, but I want it to be a little bit, challenging.
Great, thank you very much. So there is a message of democratization here at the end of what you're saying, that people are going to be able to pick up and use these skills, much like now CFD tools are widely used and proliferated throughout the community, and people can just pick them up and use them. Thanks very much. I think it's just gone 10 to the hour, and I think that's probably all the time that we've got. I'm looking to my CUP colleagues to come in at this stage. Is that right, folks? This is it?
Yes, that's right. So thank you very much again, Omar, for hosting this panel, expertly.